Will Frei here, and welcome back to Following Christ's Footsteps, Siguiendo los Pasos de Jesus. I'm here shooting this video from Charleston, South Carolina, where I arrived last night on the way back from Ohio, where I participated in the St. John Bosco conference. I took the youth ministry track, in which I went workshop after workshop, gaining tools and insights for youth ministry. So this episode, I'd like to take the time to speak about one point that I thought was very intriguing. I thought many were intriguing, but especially this one during my conference, and that is what's called the deposit of faith. Now, as Catholics, we believe in both Scripture and tradition, and this is exactly what the deposit of faith is: sacred Scripture and sacred tradition. I'd first like to speak about sacred Scripture. Now, we as Catholics and Christian believers understand and know the importance of Scripture. We know that Scripture is in fact God's very word, divine revelation. Now, through reason, Thomas Aquinas argues, we can come to know the existence of God. But without Scripture, we would not know that God is indeed loving and personable. God himself had to reveal this through Scripture, through the prophets, and through revelation. And this is why sacred Scripture is so important. The second point I'd like to discuss is sacred tradition. Now, we as Catholics do not rely solely on Scripture, as our Protestant brothers and sisters do. Rather, we also have the second aspect, called sacred tradition. And in fact, we as Catholics believe that while Scripture is truly important, sacred tradition is even more important, because in fact, Scripture is the very product of sacred tradition. Even before Scripture was written, the early Christians would celebrate the Last Supper, recreation, what we call the Holy Eucharist. And early on, the Bible, the New Testament, was passed through word of mouth and parable, just as Jesus taught. So as time went on, the early Christians realized that they had to write the details and the parables down in order to remember them and pass them further on through the generations. So this is what we come to know as tradition. And though we as Catholics find that tradition is more important than Scripture, the two cannot be separated. Scripture is a direct product of tradition, and tradition is realized and remembered through Scripture. So this is why they are so important. So these are the two aspects that we call the deposit of faith in the Catholic Church. Thank you so much for joining me this Tuesday. I hope you could take away something from the video. Please tune in next Tuesday as I further talk about the Catholicism and the seminarian life. Thank you so much, and God bless.